Alright, what's up guys? My name is Zack, and today I am driving a 1969 Ford Ranchero 500. Up front is a 351 cubic inch V8, and down below is a 3-speed automatic transmission. Now, I am super excited to be driving this Ranchero 500 for several reasons. First of all, I love driving older vintage cars like this, and this is actually a pretty good runner. Might not be the prettiest one on planet Earth, but it does run very, very well, and I'm excited to show you that. But the second reason is that the Ranchero to me is always somewhat of a special vehicle. The El Camino always gets the spotlight, but the El Camino actually came out as a rebuttal to this vehicle. Ford launched the Ranchero years before Chevy put out the El Camino, and so this is actually the original American Ute, and I'm excited to share it with you today. Also, I do want to say this is a Ranchero 500. However, a previous owner has put some dress-up parts on it to make it look like a GT. This is actually a 500. But if you'd like to submit your own vehicle and have it reviewed here on the channel, you can head on over to my website, zackpradel.com/submit. It's a quick and easy submission form. It takes under a minute to fill out, and I come out to you. And if you'd like to see all my videos weeks or sometimes months in advance, you can head on over to my Patreon for only $5 a month. But let's get back to that 351 Windsor under the hood. Well, it works out to be about a 5.8 liter V8. There were several engines available here in the Ranchero. This obviously was one of them. They had bigger engines. The GT could be had with the 351 or some big 7-liter-ish V8. They also had smaller ones. This is actually the first year of the 351 Windsor, and it's fine. It's not the quickest V8 ever, but at the time, V8s weren't always that fast. They were big, torquey engines, yes, but Speed Demon's not quite. That's why you could actually get one of these with the Cobra Jet engine, and that was a proper Speed Demon. The 351 does its job. It listens to instructions pretty well, but otherwise, it's not anything to brag about. Now, like I said, paired to it is a 3-speed automatic. Now, you could have gotten these in a 4-speed manual, 4 on the floor, blah, blah, blah. This is the automatic, and it's shifting fine enough for a transmission from the 1960s. Here in 2026, it's doing a fine enough job. Last but not least, of course, the Ranchero is rear-wheel drive. Well, because it has to be. How does it feel to drive the 1969 Ford Ranchero? It's pretty good. That's the biggest thing, and we'll talk about this with the final thoughts segment. It drives like a car of the time. This, of course, did share parts with the Ford Torino of the time, vehicles like that, and so it drives like a car. However, like I mentioned, a previous owner put dress-up parts to make it look like a GT. What they actually forgot was that the GT got front disc brakes. So this Ranchero 500 actually has 4-wheel drums. So you have to stand on the brakes to get it to stop, which I'm pretty used to driving old vintage cars, but if you've never driven something as old as this and you want to experience the Ranchero, get ready to possibly brake with both feet and anticipate stop signs well before you reach them. But other than that, visibility is good. Throttle response is fine for a vehicle from this era. Like I said, that 351 Windsor is kind of lazy, but that's okay. And it is more car than it is truck. Here we go. Yeah! With that stuff out of the way, let's talk about the interior. Well, in front of me, I have 4 gauge pods. So off to the left is my temperature and fuel. In the center is the speedometer. Off to the right, I get my alternator and oil pressure lights. And then we have a dead gauge. This would normally be a clock on the higher GT trim, but here for the 500, they did not include that. The steering wheel is wooden, as well as it has Ford in the middle. And off to the left, we do have our headlights and washers. On the door, we have our manual mirrors and manual window adjustments. And moving into the center, we do have switches for our heat and defrost. Down below, we have an aftermarket radio, and we have the ignition off to the right. We do get some added gauges down below. Previous owner added these just to keep an eye on things since the gauge cluster gauges aren't really the best. We have a big open area, meaning no cup holders here in the Ranchero 500, so it fails the big friggin' bottle test. And then we have the bench seat. Again, the GT would have had 2 bucket seats. The 500 and the base model got the bench, which I actually probably prefer the bench in a vehicle like this. Racing bucket seats in a car like this just doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless you did opt for that big block V8. Here with the 351, it's going at a fine enough pace, but I don't feel like I really need bucket seats to strap me into this missile. Now, we don't have any back seats, of course. No Ranchero ever came with back seats, but we do have a bed, so let's go talk about that. All right, we're on the back of the 1969 Ford Ranchero, and this is what made the Ranchero special, because it was car up front, truck out back. The Ranchero only came as this. There wasn't like a Ranchero sedan or anything of that sort. So very, very cool to see that. Coming around the back to open up the bed, you have a handle in here and you pull it down like a traditional tailgate. Then you have a bed. That's it. I mean, this is the bed of the Ranchero. Nothing special at all. No crazy tie downs or LED lights or anything like that. This was a pretty simple, basic truck, and it was sold to people that wanted truck things. Maybe you had, you know, some small machinery. Maybe you had a flower shop, and you know, you put all the flowers in the back, but you didn't need a giant pickup truck. And honestly, a big part of these was just style. They look cool, they are cool, and the 1960s was all about style. You know, it was before the regulations really cracked down, and so automotive designers could really have a field day, and they did, obviously. Here they made a pickup truck out of a car, which is very, very cool, and that is how the bed operates. Really simple. Put it right back up. And there you go. Now we gotta talk about the looks. And this is a very, very rare color. I will put it up on the screen. I actually forgot my phone during this review. So I'm really living the 1960s life of no cell phone, and I had my notes on there. It's a very rare color. They only put it on a couple hundred of the Rancheros. They offered it in a couple other Ford products for 1969. But that's it. So very, very cool. I also love the look of the Ranchero. And this body style was only for 68 and 69. They completely changed it for 70, and from 66 to 68, it was a different body style as well. This is a 4th generation Ranchero, when the other Ranchero I reviewed was a 1965, and that was a 2nd generation. So there was a whole generation of Ranchero in between my recent reviews. That's how quickly things moved in the 1960s. They got several generations within the same decade, where now we have companies like Nissan that hold on to their models for 10, 11, 12 years. The Dodge Durango is going on its 15th year. That is absolutely bonkers. That was not the case here in the 1960s. This is a 2-year only body style with a 1-year paint. With all of that being said, let's get on to my final thoughts. What do I think driving the Ford Ranchero 500 for the first time in its 4th generation configuration? Well, I think this thing is absolutely awesome. I love it because it has this really, really cool look to it. It catches people's attention. This thing is just such a blast to drive. And it really does blend pickup truck and muscle car very, very well. So why don't we get cars like this anymore? Why did we see these in the late 50s, 60s, 70s, and into the 80s? But after the 80s, we don't really see utes like this in the States. Now, Australia is a different market, and I'd love to talk about Holden utes when I go to Australia and film them. So we'll save that conversation for another video. But we don't get vehicles like this anymore for 2 reasons. First of all, why we got them in the first place in the 50s, 60s, and 70s is the fact that trucks at the time rode like garbage. I have driven a bunch of them from the era. I will show you them now. And all of them have a vendetta against your spine. Driving those is really like driving covered wagons with big blocks in them. And that's fine for their purpose. They're heavy duty trucks. They're able to tow thousands and thousands of pounds. But if you wanted a truck and you could only have one vehicle, you were stuck driving those awful, awful vehicles. And again, I say awful in terms of ride quality and daily ability. They're very awesome in many ways. But going to the mom and pop ice cream shop in a Ford F-250 from the era is not a very pleasurable experience. And so that's where vehicles like this started to come in, because they utilize the front suspension of a regular sedan and they drive like the cars of the time. And it's way more comfortable than any of the pickup trucks even fathomed in the 1960s. But we don't get them anymore, and there's two reasons for that. First of all, trucks these days ride a lot nicer. You get into a brand new F-150, and it feels like a luxury item more than a hardcore pickup truck. So we don't really need pickup trucks that drive like cars, because full-size pickup trucks drive like cars now. So it's not really necessary. The other reason we don't get these anymore is because mini trucks became so prevalent. In the 1970s, as the El Camino and Ranchero were on the decline, a little old company called Toyota started importing their Toyota pickups here, and they caught on really, really quickly. You were able to have a smaller, easier, livable little pickup truck for around the same price, if not cheaper, than a Ranchero or El Camino. So those gained huge popularity in the 1980s. We saw the rise of the Ford Ranger, the Chevy S10, the Mitsubishi Mighty Max, a Toyota pickup, the Nissan Hardbody. I could list many, many more. And so those little trucks then made this truck even more obsolete, because if I wanted a little around town vehicle, I could get one. And honestly, the Japanese trucks that were coming in were more reliable than this vehicle. So the market for a truck, car, middle ground like this pretty much dried up. And if it didn't dry completely up, there were at least better options available. Technology progressed and left this sort of style of vehicle in the past. However, today I'm not angry about operating in the past. I like it. It's comfortable. And this is just an awesome, awesome automobile. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Huge thank you to Ted for letting me borrow his Ranchero for today's video. I have reviewed so many of Ted's vehicles, and this is actually the nicest riding one I'll review of his today, because I'm also reviewing his 1950 Case DC3. So if you want to talk about harsh riding vehicles, well, that's the one to mention. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.